Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Driftwood Ranch. I'm Randy Ray, the Literate Texan, and I'm very excited about something. I'm starting to feel a little left out, though, but it's my own fault. So a few days ago, Michael K. Vaughn posted about an event he's got planned for September called Cimmerian September. The idea is to read all of the Conan the Barbarian stories by Robert E. Howard over the course of the month of September. And I have it on good authority that to do this, you only need to read about 30 pages a day. Well, anybody can handle that, even the poor old literate Texan. But let's talk a little bit about Conan the Barbarian, at least my experience with Conan the Barbarian. Of course, I grew up in Texas, and Robert E. Howard is also from Texas. Every year out in Cross Plains, Texas, they have a barbarian festival in honor of Robert E. Howard's life. And of course, Conan the Barbarian is Robert E. Howard's signature character. And Conan the Barbarian is a big part of my youth because, as anyone who's been watching the channel knows, I'm a big fantasy role-playing dork. And I was also a big comic book collector. I think the Venn diagram with those overlapping is probably pretty good anyway. But as a kid, growing up in the 1970s in Bonham, Texas, my first exposure to Conan the Barbarian was in Marvel comic books because they had the Conan the Barbarian comic books. But what was, for me, even better than the Conan the Barbarian comic books was the magazine-sized comic book, The Savage Sword of Conan. And you could only buy the Savage Sword of Conan magazines at the small grocery store on the wrong side of town, ladies' food store. And I loved those magazine-sized comic books. They were just terrific. So that was my first exposure. I just thought Conan the Barbarian was just another comic book character until I became a teenager. And then I discovered the L. Sprague, DeCamp, Lynn Carter series where they tried to turn this series of short stories and novelettes into a coherent chronological saga from beginning to end, which is not how Robert E. Howard had pictured this tale. In his mind, from what I've read, the idea was that you're sitting in a bar somewhere drinking a beer with this old man who's relating stories of his life. And if you've ever been in that sort of situation, and most people have, people that age don't share their stories in chronological order, okay? They'll say, okay, well, I was born in Omaha, Nebraska. 3 days later, I was adopted and brought to Texas. And then I went to kindergarten. And that's just not how most people tell their life stories. They just come up with different stories about different events in their life. And in fact, the Conan stories start kind of towards the end. If you read them, in the order that they were written and published. The first Conan story published in Weird Tales was called The Phoenix on the Sword. And Conan is already the king of Aquilonia in that particular story. And then the chronology jumps around. But since chronological ordered sagas were kind of the in thing to do in the 1980s in fantasy fiction, L. Sprague DeCamp and Lynn Carter decided to try to publish 12 or they might have been 13 or 14 books outlining the saga of Conan's life in order. And it was largely a failure. They were also really heavy editors, and they wrote some of their own stories to include in there, which were invariably not as good as the original. Robert E. Howard's a pretty tough act to follow when it comes to writing action, adventure, and pulp type fiction. Anyway, but then they'd also take stories that Robert E. Howard had written about other characters, and they would rewrite them as Conan stories, which was, more successful than their own attempts at original Conan fiction. But I remember loving those books as a kid. I didn't know any better. I didn't know that it was supposed to be this way. So I've seen various editions recommended, two main ones. One is The Coming of the Cimmerian, which looks like just a really big, thick book with all of them in there. The other edition that I've seen recommended is the Del Rey edition, which I have all of the Robert E. Howard Del Rey books. They're not just Conan books. There's 13 or 14 of them, including the best horror stories of Robert E. Howard, The Adventures of Solomon Kane, who's another favorite character of mine. But I have all of these. I'm going to show them off on camera here. I bought these a couple of years ago. The Coming of Conan the Cimmerian, I believe, is the first in the series here. Okay, so the original adventure of the greatest sword and sorcery hero of all time. And there's a Stephen King quote on the cover. It says, Howard's writing seems so highly charged with energy that it nearly gives off sparks. But anyway, this has got beautiful illustrations in it. And I understand from one of the other videos I watched, I think it was the Michael K. Vaughn video. I'm going to link to all those videos in the description below, by the way. But I believe what I read or heard on one of Michael K. Vaughn's videos was that if you download this on the Kindle, it does not come with the illustrations. But this one comes with a lot of different stories, okay? The Phoenix on the Sword, the Frost Giant's Daughter, the God in the Bowl, which is a really terrific story. The Tower of the Elephant, I remember that one real well. The Scarlet Citadel, Queen of the Black Coast is terrific. Conan takes as his lover this pirate woman. Black Colossus, Iron Shadows in the Moon, Zuthal of the Dusk, The Pool of the Black One, Rogues in the House. That's another one I remember from childhood. It was really good. The Veil of Lost Women. That's a good place for me to travel to. The Devil in Iron. Okay, and that's about 319 pages. I've read most of these before, if not all of them, but I say it's 319 pages. But the type, and you may or may not be able to tell looking at this, the type is really small. I mean, these are dense pages, but the illustrations are just beautiful. Also, there's a lot of extra material in here, miscellanea they call it here. Like there's a first draft of the Phoenix on the Sword, notes on the various peoples of the Hyborian Age. There's an article about the Hyborian Age. The Hyborian Age is this mythical prehistory that Conan exists during, and a lot of it involves Robert E. Howard taking names of actual civilizations from real history and just changing a letter or two to make it easy to keep up with. I never caught this as a teenager. I didn't know about it until I started reading these Del Rey editions. A lot of these are what I would consider short stories. I'm looking at the Wikipedia article on my computer here, and most of these are described as novelettes. Although at least one of them is called a novella, which I think is longer than a novelette, but shorter than a full novel. I don't know. I think these kinds of designations are largely arbitrary. But that's just the first of 3 books. Excuse me. The Bloody Crown of Conan is the second book. If you're going to have a crown, it might as well be bloody, right? So, another quote from Stephen King on the cover. Here's the cover. Beautiful cover. All of these are beautiful covers. So, stories such as The People of the Black Circle glow with the fierce and eldritch light of Howard's frenzied intensity. You know what? It's amazing how prolific Robert E. Howard was, because if I'm not mistaken, he committed suicide at the age of 30. And he had cranked out the stories, but I guess that's what pulp writing is all about too, right? So, this one only has 3 stories in it. The People of the Black Circle, which is about 80 pages long. The Hour of the Dragon, which is like 170 pages long. And A Witch Shall Be Born, which is another 50 pages long. And then you've got more miscellanea and appendices in this one too, including some notes on the chronology and the original text. The final book, and I might not have these in the right order, but I think I do, is The Conquering Sword of Conan. If you're going to have a sword, it might as well be a conquering one, right? Harry Turtledove has a quote on the back of this one. For headlong, non-stop adventure, and for vivid, even florid scenery, no one even comes close to Howard. Harry Turtledove would know, right? So, in this one, we have The Servants of Bit Yakin. I may be mispronouncing that. I'd have to ask Michael K. Vaughn. Beyond the Black River, The Black Stranger, The Man-Eaters of Zambula, and Red Nails. And I guess that's it. So there's 5 stories in this one, 3 in this one. That's 8. And I didn't count how many were in this first volume here. Let's see. I'm guessing there's at least 10. I think there are 18 Conan stories in all from the originals here. Let's see. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 plus 8. So there's 21 Conan stories in all to read in September if you just stick with the basic Robert E. Howard stuff. But I don't know if anybody else remembers this, but in the 80s and 90s, there were a large number of Conan pastiche novels that were of really varied quality. They're kind of fun to read, but they bear only a passing resemblance to what Robert E. Howard created in these books. Actually, none of the movies got Conan right at all. Honestly, the comic book adaptations, the ones written by Roy Thomas were really the best adaptations, and that artwork in those is just gorgeous in all of them. Anyway, I'm really excited about this event. I plan to participate fully, and I post a lot of videos in September about this, good Lord willing and health permitting. But I didn't want to feel left out when Steve Donahue, Michael K. Vaughan, and David Wiley have already made videos announcing that this is coming up in September. So if you've read Conan before, it's a good chance to revisit it. If you've never read him before, here's your chance, man. Sword and sorcery is almost as much fun as sword and planning. But for now, that's about all I have to say about Cimmerian September. Until my next video, stay hydrated, stay sexy, and thanks for watching.